Anyhow, I just want to shift now quickly. There's a thing on technology. The second thing I want to just touch on, and these are going to be quicker ones, is I just want to touch on this thing, the globalization of everything. Again, another world historic shift going on here, and things that it really does change everything. And so, and again, this is the arc of your career. You're going to have to redesign all these systems. So how do we really work globally on everything? And so just a couple little data points I want to say about this thing is, again, throwing some numbers here that some people might be familiar with. You kind of feel it in your bones, but you don't really see the numbers. It's worth reminding ourselves, because this is now back in your era here, is that only in the year 2000, oops, where's the number? Oh, we lost the bottom line here. Oh, I lost it. Anyhow, this is back in 2000, the turn of the century, basically only 31% of people in North America were online. Let me think, Jesus, that was only 12 years ago, right? A third of our, and this was the rest of the world online. It really was, and as much as we talked about in the Bay Area here, it's like, oh man, we're all wired. It was not true. Now, what's happened in the last decade to 2010, those numbers really went up, and of course now we're close to 80% of the North America has it. But what's interesting is Middle East, right? They're back where we were, and hey, what's happened? They got the same tools, they got the same connectivity, and then you can see the whole region's up in flames, right? Anyhow, stuff happens, but this is where the world is. Well, it's getting more interesting than that, folks, because if you take just a look out in the next 10 years, here's the way to kind of think of what's happening here, is we've already got about a third of the planet, about 2 billion people, a little more than that, who are already online. So think of it as a percentage, right? We've already got 75% of the planet on cell phones. Not online, but at least have the basic telecom connection through a cell phone, which is extraordinary. I mean, people literally 15, 20 years ago, basically nobody had cell phones. And now you got 75% of the world, including peasants in the middle of Africa with them, right? Well, it's not going to take long till everyone on the planet, barring a few kind of pockets, are going to have at least those little phones. And we know on the back of those phones, you can put the internet kind of just builds right on the back of those kind of telecom connections. And we know on the back of those connections, you can 3G, you're going to put 4G and full bandwidth. And so it's inevitable, just bank on it, that within the next 10 years, you're essentially going to have broadband connections to everybody on the planet. The Holy Grail, again, something we've talked about in the digital revolution since the early 90s. It's going to happen. It's there. Bank on it. So that's the world that we're going to have. Well, so, wow, you can open video connections to anybody on the planet in 10 years. Wow, you can do these collaborations that, right now we're just kind of doing in these elite little centers. Anyhow, it starts to get really interesting of what you can do. Now, it's not just tech, though, that's doing this global thing. I don't want to get too much into it because we don't have enough time, but I want to just stake out this. Since the collapse of the Cold War, which is basically here in the 80s, you've watched two things happen. One is the interconnection of the entire planet in the same one market, which is world historical, and the second thing is this incredible rise in democracy and this drop in autocracies, essentially. And again, the numbers are quite astounding, and we're still seeing it repercussions through the Middle East. But again, this is something that's really a shift. That's a big deal. Now, I want to talk about that integration from this big picture perspective, is because people are wringing their hands like, oh my God, what about this recession? And oh my God, the economy is still kind of out of juice, and what's going on here? From the point of view of essentially the global economy, we have just witnessed the greatest boom in the history, and we're kind of at the end of it, and we got a lot of running room ahead of us, of a fantastic boom ahead of us here too. Now here, let me just give you this sense. When you talk about long booms, the big economic expansions that have happened in the history of the world, they come from two main things. New technologies, which allow you to do totally new things and drive new economic activity, and integration, more and more tightly integrated markets. Barriers between countries falling, barriers between sectors falling. And so the classic one, which everyone kind of goes back to and says, oh my God, why can't we be like the good old World War II days, was what happened in World War II. But the thing is, what has happened since the World War II one, there's a total parallel to what's happened in our area here. And I just want to make this little thing here just to kind of give us this perspective like, oh my God, we're like that World War II crew. So one thing is, World War II ends, all the technologies that were developed in the war, which were mainframe computers, plastics, commercial aviation, atomic energy, all kinds of stuff, right, goes from the military side to the private sector. Tons of new things we can build new things around, which is what they basically started to do. That's one. The second thing is we took half the world, the free world, integrated those economies of the Western economies, and we got this kind of integrated economy that kind of could spur growth. Those two things is the main reason why America boomed. Why America? We love technology. 2, we loved the most open economy, so we took advantage of the integration. We had this boom going. By the 60s, the entire Western world was on fire. We all were booming, and it was only in the 70s when you got these oil shocks, which was the lifeblood of that industrial economy, and just quadrupled the prices of oil, that we essentially flamed out after about a 30-year run of incredibly robust growth, brought a lot of people around. So you think, oh my God, we look back and say, oh, those are the golden days. Not that different, frankly, what we've just lived through. And here's the thing, what happened. The Cold War ends here in the 80s. The same two meta trends happen. One is all these new technologies developed by the military go into the private sector. Computer chips initially were designed to guide cruise missiles. The internet was designed to kind of communicate in nuclear war, right? Spy satellites, all these things, these GPS things are on now, that was all about looking into Russia, right, and kind of keeping an eye on their missile silos and stuff. It all goes into the private sector, and so then we start building these crazy companies on this stuff, right? That's one thing. The next thing is you took not just half the world, you took the entire world. Communist China, communist Russia, this quasi kind of socialist India, you put them all in the same integrated kind of world economy, and of course you got this incredible boom, conditions for a boom. And so who takes advantage of it the decade after that? America. Hey, we love tech. We're the most open economy. We go gangbusters. We had this crazy boom going in the 90s, right? Just wild going. We loved it, right? But this last decade where we kind of think in America was kind of slowish, it was a global boom. The entire global economy is on fire, folks. I mean, China, Brazil, you name it, Turkey, I mean, places all over the place, they're booming. They're still actually, although there's this pause, I'm sure we'll get to, crazy kind of growth going on. And ultimately the question is, how do you manage that kind of growth? How do we make the transition to the next big updraft? Which I'm arguing we're going to do, and that's through this kind of reinvention. Now, just to show you how this is going, all the metrics have to be global. Think about America in the context of we are just this kind of sector or this region in this global economy. And if you look at the global economy that way, it's been a wild ride. In fact, in terms of growth, since that post-war world, we've just been charting. And then when the communist countries start breaking down, boom, we're taking off. We're at a $61 trillion economy here, folks. Now, the more interesting thing is, because we're wringing our hands about, oh my God, poor America, we're screwed up. The U.S. has had 25% of the GDP of the world for the last 40 years. The last 40 years. The rise of China, all this stuff's going on. We still are essentially an extraordinarily big piece of the global economy, and we're going to be there for a while. And so we should stop getting all angst-ridden about, how screwed up America is. Now, think about it this way. Think about the global economy as one integrated economy, and we're just playing a piece. Well, what piece are we playing? We're playing the innovative piece. The most innovative place in the country is the United States. Now, there's other pockets around, and I don't want to get too chauvinistic here, but I just think just cut through what's going on here. If you take all the really cutting-edge sectors, particularly tech, they're still very much rooted in the United States. Not completely, but definitely from a big picture point of view, it's like, wow. All these, Silicon Valley, there's nothing remotely like it in other parts of the world. Wall Street, you can talk about how their innovation has gotten us in trouble. Hollywood, there's nothing comparable yet. The American military is completely dominant. Aerospace, to this extent, is still pretty much dominant. Higher education, people are coming here for education. They're not flocking to Beijing right now. Healthcare, same thing for the highest end thing, the innovative end. Innovative anything is happening here, and it's essentially a huge part of what's going on in this economy. And so what's happening is in a global economy, we're essentially having a lot of these innovation sectors are really at the top of this global economy. And so what's happening, again, just to kind of put this in context, the reason these tech companies are booming so much, look at the numbers here, folks. There's only 307 million people in America, right? In an average month, YouTube gets 800 million unique hits. That's, more than, way more than what's going on in this country. This is all the babies and the 90-year-olds too, right? So there's a ton of, obviously there. This is, basically which one? This is the Facebook one. Actually, when we did this chart, they were there. Now they're up to 950 million a month. And Google is well over a billion unique hits on Google search engines and stuff. So I'm just trying to say, you always got to think in these global terms, and people kind of lose track of that all the time. Now, what is in the political reason, I'm going to end this little section here on this, is what's happened because of that is the people at the top of that pyramid are reaping these global profits, essentially. And so you're getting an extraordinary concentration of wealth at the very top. And it's not just kind of the oil barons like the Koch brothers that are it's these tech companies, all these folks, they're making extraordinary amounts of money because of that thing. They're sitting on the pyramids. They're essentially milking 1 billion people a month, all over the planet a month. So what's happened is you've watched wealth get concentrated. This is a percentage of essentially the upper 1% share of total income. It's essentially up to the upper 1%. It's up at the same levels it was up back here in the robber baron era, right? And so you're watching, this was the dip in the great kind of post-war boom, right? And so we're watching the same phenomena, which is why the politics is starting to react to this and say, wait a minute, this is getting out of whack, just like the politics react to it right here. And here's one little example of policy of how this plays in this, just to kind of give you one little example of that. This is the tax rate on incomes to the top 1%, right? There was no tax. Like I remember I told you we established an income tax right here. And then it kind of went down in the 20s. We said, oh, let's get rid of that. And then it came back in the 30s. In the 50s, the booming 50s and 60s, the nominal tax rate was 91%, folks. 59. They were killing the 1%. Now, it got too much and they started to bring it down, right? But this idea that, we're killing the 1% here, that's kind of crazy. In historical terms, it's about as low as it was back in the early part of the year. This is the norm in historical terms of where. Now, I'm not saying we go back to 91%, but I'm saying this is there's some rationale, what's going on with this discussion of how do you rectify the country. It's at 35%. Now, and they want, Romney wants to get to 20, just to put it, which should be down where it was in 1928, which was, what happened in 29, right?